Hey guys, so I printed this from Schoology, so when you guys go in and upload your answers, if you get a chance to do that, this is what it'll look like, and this is the same paper that you have also. So we're going to review ascending descending from Unit 1. I'm going to go over a couple problems with you, and then the rest you'll be on your own. So I'll go over a couple of ascending with you, and then I'll go over a couple descending, and then I want you to complete the rest on your own. And you will have your calculators, so hopefully that makes this go a little bit easier. So number 1, write the following numbers in order from least to greatest, or also ascending order. That's a word that you'll see. So the first thing we need to do, we have all these fractions. We have 3 fractions. They don't look the same, so I'm going to turn them into decimals. And by doing that, I'm going to say 3 divided by 4, and that gives me 0.75. So I'm going to write 0.75 up here. 1/4, 1 divided by 4 is 0.25, and 7/8. So 7 divided by 8 is 0.875. And for me personally, it helps me if I write them in a line on top of each other, so I can kind of compare a little bit easier. And then 0.875. So they don't all have the same amount of digits. This bottom one has 3, 1, 2, 3. If it helps you visually to see an extra, that they all have the same amount of numbers, you can add zeros wherever you have those placeholders. So how we're going to do this, these little boxes out to the side, we're just going to write 1, 2, or 3 next to the correct spot. So least to greatest, I need the smallest number first. So I'm going to compare the first number in each one, because technically they all start with 0. There's nothing there, so those are all the same. So starting with the first number that I see, 7, 2, and 8. So think about which one is the smallest out of those 3 numbers. And your thought should be the 2. So that means that 0.25, which was actually 1/4, I'm going to put a number 1 out to the side of that number. Okay, you don't have to circle it. That's how we're going to do this. On Schoology, it lets you slide them around and put them in order. The printed version isn't as nice. Okay, so same number. I want to look to see what is the next smallest number. Or you could look to see what's the biggest and do your process of elimination. But I'm just going to go from there and look up at the next smallest number. So I'm comparing 7. Use a different color. I'm using 7 or 8. So the smaller of those 2 numbers is going to be 7, which would be 3/4. So I'm going to put a 2 next to 3/4. And that means 7/8 is third. Okay, I'm going to go over one more. I'm going to go over question 2 because there are negatives, and that is kind of confusing to a lot of people. So let's go ahead. I got a lot of fractions, kind of ugly numbers. I'm going to turn these all into decimals so they look the same. So 4 squared, or 4 times 4 is 16. So I'm going to write that above it. And again, I'm going to put mine in a line. That is easier for me to see. And then 5 divided by 2, negative 5 divided by 2, is negative 2.5. Negative 1/3, 1 divided by 3, negative 0.33, and then 1/16, 1 divided by 16, is 0.0625. Okay, so now I know which decimals go with which fractions, and I'm going to write them all in a line. So I have 16, negative 2.5, negative 0.33, and 0.0625. So these numbers all look totally different. First of all, 16, I'm going to add a decimal and some zeros. And I'm going to go ahead and add some zeros to the rest of my numbers just so they kind of look the same-ish. Okay, least to greatest. If we have negatives, we know that our smallest number is going to be one of those negatives. So just looking at my first list of numbers, I have 2 negatives. I have negative 2.5, and I have negative 0.3. The rule with the negatives is the farther away it is from being a positive, the smaller it is. So when I'm comparing negative 2 to negative 0, the negative 2 is going to be the smaller one, because if we had a number line, we'll say negative 0.3 is right here. And we'll say this is negative 1 and this is negative 2. Negative 2 is farther away than that 0.3. So that means this guy is the smaller one. So negative 2.5 was my smallest one. That was this fraction. So I'm going to put a number 1 out to the side of negative 5 over 2. And then I only have one other negative number, this negative 0.3. So that has to be my number 2. That should say 1/3. Sorry, that's my bad. Good thing you're watching this. And my next smallest number, I'm going to compare, since I already used these, those are done, I'm going to compare 16 to 0. Which of those is the smaller number? I hope in your head you said 0. That would be 1/16. So that's going to be 3. And then 4 squared, or 16, is my last one. That's the biggest one. These you are doing on your own. 4 you're doing on your own. Now we're at 5. 5 is where it changes up a little bit. This says greatest to least. So we're going the opposite way. We're going big to small. So I'm going to do the same thing. I want to set them up the same. I need them to all be decimals so they look the same. So I have 0.395, 5/11. So I'm going to say 5 divided by 11. And that is 0.45. It keeps going. It repeats, but I'm just going to put 0.45. 0.5, 2/5. So I'm going to say 2 divided by 5. And that is 0.4. So I'm going to go over here and make my list. 0.395, 0.45, 0.5, and 0.4. And again, if it helps you, you can fill in with zeros. Visually, it might help you if they look the same as far as how big and small they are. Okay. So first off, I noticed they all start with zeros. That doesn't really help me. That means they're all the same as far as that goes. Now we're looking for the biggest number. So let's look at the next number over. We've got 3, 4, 5, and 4. So you need to be thinking to yourself, what's the biggest number out of that list? And you should hopefully be thinking it's this one. Okay, so that's my biggest number I have. So I'm going to put a 1 out to the side of that number. Okay. Now we're going to go back through them. I've already used the 0.5, so now I'm going to look again. I've got 0.3, 0.4, 0.4. Okay, we have an issue because I have two of the same. I have 0.4 and I have 0.4. So that means I got to go to the next number over. So if I'm looking at this number and I go 1 over, that number is 5. Okay, go back down to the other 0.4 and go to the next number, and that is 0. So in your mind, you need to be thinking which of those is bigger. Is it 5 or is it 0? And I hope your mind is telling you that it is 5. 5 is bigger than 0. So the 0.450 was 5/11. Okay, so that's our number 2. And really, we could keep going, but we're going to go back to the first little numbers. We've used this one, we've used this one. So now we're left at comparing 3 to 4. So what's your bigger number out of 3 or 4? 0.4, which was 2/5. We're going to go through one more together, and then you are on your own. Okay, place the number in order from greatest to least. This one is a yucky one. Lots of different things. Okay, descending order. So like we've said before, big numbers to small numbers. Remember, small, if there are negatives, that's where those are going to go. So So we've got negative 2.1, 0.2, negative 2.095. This 9 over 100 is the only one that's not already in a decimal form, but that's okay. I did 9 divided by 100, and I got 0.09. So again, I'm going to put them in order, or not in order, but I'm just going to line them up because it helps me and it helps my brain to see them lined up. Negative 2.095, 0.09. Okay. Biggest number to smallest number. First of all, if we're looking for the biggest number, I'm going to go ahead and just ignore these two negative numbers. Oh, these two negative numbers. I know those are going to be my smallest because they're negative, so I don't even want them in my life right now. So I start with 0. Those are the same. We got to go over to the next number. So it's either 2 or 0. Out of 2 or 0, what's the bigger number? 2. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to put a little 1. And if you want to, if it helps you, sometimes it does help me when there's a lot of numbers to just completely mark a number out. Like, I'm done with that number, I've used it, done. So now I'm left with negative 2.1, negative 2.095, and 0.09. Only one of those is a positive number. That has to be my next biggest, okay? So the 0.09 is going to be my number 2, and that was 9 over 100. So I'm going to put a 2 here. So now we've used that number. Now we're left with 2 negative numbers. So I have negative 2 and negative 2. Those are the same. So now I'm going to move over to the next number, 1 or 0. So 1 is my bigger digit, but when we are talking about negatives, the bigger the digit, the smaller the actual number. So in this case, this one, and I know this is so confusing, but in this case, this is the smallest because it is farther away. Always think about a number line. It is farther away from being a positive or from 0 than this one. Very slightly, but it is farther away. So that means 3 is going to be this negative 2.0 and then 4. Okay. On your own from here, this one, 3 squared, you can use the x squared button on your calculator, or you can solve 3 times 3, 5 divided by 2, square root of 121. Hit the blue second. You'll hit the blue second button, and you'll hit the button that looks like this. There will be a blue, there's a blue like square symbol above it, but that's how you'll get that on your calculator. Anything else that is confusing? The rest of this page is greatest to least, so biggest to smallest. Draw a number line.